Hi, everybody, and welcome to this first of our In Detail webinars, which celebrate the special category awards from our 2025 awards. This year, they were judged by Jessim Al-Jawad, Anne Nisbet, Caroline Brewer, and Craig Hamilton. They shortlisted 21 buildings, and there were 11 winners and a further 7 special awards winners. So this is the first of the special awards in detail series. So if you haven't already, please head to the RIAS events page on the website and sign up for some of the other sessions. They'll all be recorded and they'll be available on our YouTube shortly after. Today, I'm joined by David Gardner from Holmes Miller, who will give us an insight into HMP and YOI Stirling. I'll introduce him further later on. And it was the winner of our Innovation Award. So I'm also joined today by Chloe Martyn of TCM Capital, and it's they who generously supported this award. So as I mentioned, it will be recorded and it will be shared afterwards. There's going to be a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, so please put your questions there, and I will be able to ask David them after his presentation. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Chloe Martyn of TCM Capital and thank her for the sponsorship of the Innovation Award and support of RIAS. Chloe co-founded TCM Capital, and its main purpose is to support businesses in the built environment, particularly architects. And she specialises in helping clients unlock funding through tax relief and R&D credits, tax credits, capital allowances, land remediation relief, and energy incentives. She's very passionate about driving innovation, and therefore it's really appropriate that she sponsors this award. She's committed to ensuring businesses maximise opportunities to reclaim and reinvest. So first of all, a few words from Chloe. Thank you very much, Chloe.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. It's great to be invited on this webinar. I believe this is the first in the series celebrating the deserving winners of the RIAS Awards. Just a very quick intro from me, I suppose, into TCM Capital. So, as Karen said, we're a UK-based funding specialist and we help businesses access and optimise government grants and tax reliefs. And this includes R&D tax relief, capital allowances, land remediation, R&D grants. Essentially, we employ a team of engineers, chartered surveyors, chartered accountants, and we bring this deep industry expertise, which helps simplify the process, maximise value for our clients. We take care of all of the admin, guide clients through every step, and then also provide, I suppose, a full and free defence of any claims that are submitted to HMRC. So it just gives that peace of mind that everything's in capable hands. As Karen quite rightly said, obviously, this was our first year partnering with RIS to introduce a new category, which was the Innovation Award. And we were really, really excited to introduce this award because as a business, we strongly believe that innovation deserves to be recognised and celebrated, especially in sectors like architecture that have, they have the power to shape society. So, in our eyes, innovation in architecture, it's not just about new technologies or new materials, it's also about challenging assumptions and rethinking how businesses can serve people in the communities, I suppose pushing the boundaries of what's possible socially, environmentally, culturally. So with that in mind, I guess I'd like to extend our warmest congratulations to Holmes Miller, who were the winners of the inaugural Innovation Award, for their work at HMP and YOI Stirling. We felt this project perfectly encapsulate the spirit of the awards. It's ambitious, it's humane, deeply thoughtful in its approach. And it shows how design at its best can improve lives and set new standards for the future. So I'm very excited to hear David talk through the project in this session. And with that in mind, I'll now hand back over to Karen. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Chloe. It's a very good seg into David's talk. Thank you. David Gardner is the design director at Holmes Miller Architects, and he's got a wealth of experience working in key sectors, everything from residential, custodial, commercial to healthcare. He was heavily involved working with the Scottish Prison Service from concept stage and planning to completion. And he worked on this to set a new benchmark for custodial design in the UK. It was visionary. He's basically going to introduce the project and just tell us exactly why it's an innovative and excellent design facility. Over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Karen. And thanks to RIAS for inviting us to present today, and also thanks to Chloe for kind words. Okay, let me just share my screen. Can everybody see the front page slide there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so thanks again for allowing us to present this project. I can see that there's Ian Smith from the Scottish Prison Service, who was heavily involved in the project as a client when we started the concept design stage. There's bits of the presentation which Ian was heavily involved with, and so I'll obviously good to see you here, Ian, and we'll kind of touch on some of these aspects as we go through the presentation. So I'm going to run through essentially a little bit of background on the project, and a bit on sort of inspiration, which is really where Ian came into things. Talk you through the design process, and have a look in detail a little bit about materials and interiors, and I'll touch on a little bit of feedback that we've received from the staff on the ground now that the project's operational. So I won't dwell on this slide. I think everybody knows where Stirling is, just to in central Scotland, just north of Glasgow and Edinburgh. The site itself sits to the north of Stirling city centre, between Cornton and Bridge of Allen. It's a fantastic site. It's got spectacular views to the surrounding natural and historic landscape. It kind of sits in the middle of a green belt, as you can see there, which sort of runs west east, and so this was a kind of starting point for us in terms of how we tie the scheme into the natural landscape. And yeah, you can see how fantastic the natural environment is, and the historic environment from that photograph. So the site, you'll see bottom centre of the picture there, that's an old photograph of the previous prison on the site. And you can see, obviously, again, looking west through the Forth Valley towards Ben Lomond in the background. So the existing prison, which was built in the 60s, predominantly, although grew over time, is a collection of fairly institutional sort of corridor-based wings of accommodation. Fairly uninspiring, I would say. When you're in the site, you really had no real sense of an overall master plan, no sense of being in such a fantastic context around the site. Yeah, the existing prison buildings were fairly, I guess, not fit for purpose. They were fairly, as I say, institutional, and kind of a little bit dead on their feet. Didn't have any joy or character or purpose to them. So in 2012, there was a report called the Angelini Report, which focused on a lot of issues around women in custody, and that was looking at basically a lot of statistics around mental health, and I'll just minimize my screen. Oh, sorry. Have I lost the? No, I've lost my PowerPoint.
No, we can still see it.
Hold on. Sorry, apologies for this. I've just got a blank RIAS logo in the middle now.
We can currently still see all your slides, like in a row.
Okay, right. Okay, I think I'm back now. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, and this obviously looked at both the statistics around the women that were in Cornton Vale and also the inadequate quality of Cornton Vale, which I mentioned was not fit for purpose. Things like high levels of self-harm and lack of constructive and meaningful activity. These things were kind of influenced by the design of the existing establishment. So there was a set of recommendations that came out off the back of that report, and the main one was that Cornton Vale should be replaced with a very much a purpose-built, trauma-informed, and new establishment that was very much focused on female women offenders. So it was very much gender specific in that regard. So, and this is where SPS and Ian Smith came in quite heavily at a very early stage. There was a lot of exercises involving the user groups, which included the governor, deputy governor, and the management team within within the existing Cornton Vale. And really, it was I guess it was a bit of a kind of get out of your comfort zone learning experience to try and push a little bit of alternative thinking around what a prison should be. There's lots of rule books around security requirements and adjacencies, but a lot of that really wasn't very helpful in terms of trying to create something that promotes well-being and provides a real true therapeutic response. So there was a lot of, I guess, abstract thinking and a lot of discussion, which Ian led with the user groups. And you can see just some of the ideas about, it's well-being. It's all about thinking differently, starting to try and, I guess, discuss things that are sometimes a little bit intangible, and then starting to look at, all of the basics. So we're talking about boundary aspect, safety, identity, and comfort, and all of these, just trying to challenge what I guess the kind of preconceived ideas of how these important aspects of design relate to prison environments. And then obviously trying to create it focused on the individuals that will be in the place. So it's all about trying to be responsive and sensitive and to create normality within the environment. And again, just starting to look at how the environment responds to some of the needs. So it's all about, it's the kind of more of the kind of mental health aspect of it, but also the basics of trying to create an environment which is comforting and promotes kind of stimulation and motivation and socializing. So this process was something that we were involved in as well with SPS, and it really was an interesting starting point, which I think the management team, it was challenging for them, but they got on board, and it really did kind of set the groundwork for the design concept stage that followed on from that. And then again, just starting to think about how landscape can be woven into the overall kind of concept as well, whether that's daylight, context, and external spaces and relationships from inside to outside spaces. We didn't really look at any local or national exemplars because I think our strategy was that there really aren't any of any merit. We did reference one or two Scandinavian projects, including this one by Moller Architects in Denmark. It's it's still a male establishment, but it does have some of the kind of human scale and relationship to the landscape that we were starting to think about, albeit I think it's still a little bit stark and potentially not quite what we were after, but I think it enabled the client to understand, what's possible within prison environments, and that's what was helpful from that regard. So in terms of the design process, most projects start off with fairly complex schedules of accommodation. This was no different. We had a series of individual houses that had to accommodate a number of bedroom spaces, and these were all broken down into particular needs and requirements, whether that be remand or high needs or settled accommodation or young offenders. And there was also a requirement for an assessment centre, which was an additional house block. So there's kind of bit of a kind of strategy starting early on to try and understand the appropriate numbers of bedrooms to put within each community, to allow a kind of understanding of what's the optimum number of women that should be socialising within an individual community. That then led on to some kind of abstract diagrams around flexibility. So trying to create house designs that allows an element of flex, so that if particular types of accommodation require higher numbers, that there can be a flexibility between the spaces to, I guess, kind of expand and contract from one wing to another. And then we started to look at different types of arrangements of bedrooms, with a particular focus on how they relate to landscape spaces. So obviously there you can see we started to look at courtyards. We looked at radial blocks and kind of folded blocks and how they relate to circulation spaces and obviously to the landscape itself. And then we looked at these an awful lot. This is just a snapshot of some of the diagrams that we pulled together just to try and understand how these sets of accommodation could be assembled into a sort of overall strategy for the house wings themselves. At the same time, all of the other accommodation on the site, this is a kind of exercise that we traditionally go through with SPS around adjacencies. There's quite significant functional and operational requirements that have to be considered at the same time. So we kind of strip these back down into bubble diagrams just to ensure that we get all the adjacencies correct and the security separation correct, but without trying to influence them into the shape of a building too much. And at this point, we started again to think about context and particularly the natural environment. And I think with SPS, we came up with this idea that the site is very much a part of a kind of landscape flow, if you like, going from the Ochils down into the Forth Valley and through the site over the River Forth and westward. So with our landscape architect, we started to look at how that journey can be experienced through a series of different types of landscape spaces. And we can talk you through those in a bit more detail as we go through the slides. So this idea where we've effectively got a flow through the site from a community or a public front of house side through to a private side with the bedrooms looking out into the landscape beyond to the west. So we started to look at how that manifests itself on the site. East being the public side and west being the sort of private side. At that point, there was a decision made that all of the house buildings should be single story, single aspect to allow an equality of experience for all of the bedrooms looking out to the west into the landscape. And then we started to obviously drive these ideas of these different character landscape zones that worked their way through the site. So you've got this kind of flow between public and semi-private and private going from east to west. So we started at that point to settle on the kind of radial form of the bedroom accommodation, and still looking at lots of examples of different types of wings. And then we settled on an arrangement where we had a series of staggered sort of subdivided wings of bedrooms that created sort of triangles of accommodation, which formed a kind of array around the site. What that allowed us to do was to effectively angle the bedrooms towards the west, which sort of maximised the amount of bedrooms that faced us west as we possibly could. And that's kind of evident from the sort of final concept drawing there, where you see we're kind of opening these wings up as we go round. And that's an aerial photograph of the finished scheme, which again shows how that works with the wings open, broken, and which allows natural light into the spaces internally. So at the same time, we went through a significant number of site arrangements. One of the difficulties that we were faced with was that we had to maintain the existing Cornton Vale prison on site, which is to the sort of south of the diagrams that you see there. It was shrunken in size, but it was still posed particular challenges. And all of that in line with trying to create a master plan that tried to pick up as much as possible with its context. So trying to create an axis through the centre of the site, which picked up on the Wallace Monument, trying to maximise views from accommodation towards the castle, and obviously trying to create the bedroom views out to the Forth Valley. So that kind of started to cement the idea of the character courtyard garden zones that kind of wind their way through the centre of the site. And again, you can sort of see that from the aerial photograph. You can see the main axis rather of the two central buildings straight towards the Wallace Monument, and a series of sort of zones of a landscape through the site. And that's just another view looking from the front. So at the bottom of the screen there, you've got the entrance plaza, and then you've got the sort of central courtyard, and then beyond that, you've got the central garden area with the houses arrayed around in the distance. This starts to touch on the sort of second concept, which was one of transparency through the site. Well, it's just a site layout, obviously, that just shows you the same arrangement. So the idea with the transparency is that generally this was a concept that started off with just one of the buildings on site, which was the prisoner reception building, which is where the women will come from courts. Traditionally, prisoners arrive via secure vans and are taken into fairly solid, austere buildings and don't see daylight for probably a couple of hours going through search processes, and it's an incredibly stressful, traumatizing experience. The idea that we tried to focus on here was to try and create a very open experience whereby every entrance that you went through into any building, you could simply see straight through it into the gardens. You could see the buildings beyond, so there was that transparency visually, but also the kind of understanding of what the process is and where you're going to go, and that was a kind of de-stressing environment to try and create. So you can see again the same image I showed a minute ago with effectively that trying to create that axis so that you can see straight through the site. And this is the reception building that the women are brought into. So very light, very airy, very open, with views through to the landscape and the houses beyond. So when they arrive, they know what is in store. They know where they're going, what direction they can see the landscape beyond, and that's a positive aspect. And that's just another couple of views from the same space. So traditionally, these are very, very internalized environments full of holding rooms and search facilities and no views to external. So as I say, what we tried to do beyond that was to extend that strategy through every single building on site, whether it be the entrance pavilion that you see at the top there, or even as you approach through the entry points to each of the house blocks, you can see straight through to the landscape beyond. This is a view from the main entrance reception. So visitors will come in into this building, and again you can see straight through to the environment within the central courtyard and beyond. And that's the second building in the series. So again, creating that link from the central courtyard on the left and through to the central gardens on the right hand side. This is a view from two link corridors that access the visits hall. So the visits hall is where visitors will arrive and will have arranged visits with the women in custody. Again, traditionally these are very enclosed institutional corridors, but what we tried to do here was to create almost a separate pavilion for the visits hall with a little garden space that both the visitors and the women in custody can access through. And again, trying to pick up as much as possible on contextual views to whether it's historic monuments in the landscape or whether it's the natural environment themselves, trying to create a sense of place and a sense of kind of pride in the context. That's a view on the left-hand side from the management suite on the first floor of the front building up to Stirling Castle. And then on the right-hand side, the bedroom spaces. This was a pretty extensive exercise that SPS had carried out in advance of us starting to develop things a little bit further. This idea that the bedroom was very much sort of transformed from being something that was quite cellular, very bars on the windows, small windows. The idea here was to try and drop the height of the window and create a reading seat incorporated to the side of the bed, removing bars on windows and just trying to maximise the relationship to the landscape beyond. I think this has been a very, very successful part of the project, particularly when you contrast it to the previous establishment, which was incredibly austere. But just something as simple as putting a green coating on the secure perimeter fence really creates a different visual appearance. And the wildflower that you see there is actually within the site boundary, so it's a managed garden space out with the perimeter as well, which is quite a fantastic view through. So I guess coupled with the transparency strategy was making sure that we had high levels of natural light and glazing, particularly around courtyard spaces. Too often courtyards can be, whilst well purposed, they can be a little bit kind of not have a stronger relationship to internal spaces as they can. So the idea of trying to make sure that we really maximise the amount of glazing around courtyard spaces. You can see here, so this is the assessment centre, which is one of the houses. This establishment is where if women are coming in for the first time, they're brought into the assessment centre, and there will be a process of deciding whether they go to another establishment elsewhere in Scotland, or potentially into one of the community custody units, or whether they stay within HMP Stirling. And again, this is a view from one of the houses into the garden spaces. Each house has its own semi-secure garden space, which allows outdoor activity. And again, you can see that they're not fully secure. They've just got hedges around them, but they're kind of defined and they're kind of visually screened from the central garden areas, and still offering views to the historic context. So in terms of materials, we tried to pick up on some contextual cues around the kind of local historic vernacular, I guess, with sort of courtyard, single-story farmsteads, and really trying to create a kind of pitched roof rationale behind that, and looking at trying to tie in material colours with the sort of sandstone colour, which is prevalent throughout Stirling. And that's just a kind of diagrammatic section of how we've used the massing of the front of house building, a two-storey, to create a little bit of civic presence, and then a human scale throughout the rest of the site. So that kind of creates a hierarchy. And these are just some views of the finished sort of courtyard areas. So this idea that we've got the kind of facing brick to try to tie in with the sandstone colours around the area, and a series of pitched roof buildings which kind of pick up on the local character. And again, some sort of smaller views to the landscape. This shows you that's the visit hall pavilion that you see, which is metal clad. So the idea was that there was a number of these metal clad pavilions that created this contrast to the solid brick, and these pavilions would be heavily glazed as you went around the site. Where we did use precast concrete, we used it with graphics, and in this instance it was to visually screen the vehicle service zone beyond, but it creates a kind of nice backdrop to the landscape gardens. Internally, our colour strategy and graphic strategy again was heavily focused on the links to the natural landscape. So obviously we're starting to look at I guess a kind of green spine, but also looking at the seasons and how different plant species will blossom in different throughout the year, and the different kind of color cycles that are created throughout the year. So that was a slightly kind of abstract approach, but what it kind of set up a background palette and an accent palette that we used throughout. So different buildings had different accents in relation to particular uses. There was a little bit of an exercise on colour psychology that came part of that, which we explored with SPS at the time. So that's an example again of the assessment centre. So you can see the kind of relationship between the sort of green tones of the landscape and accent colours, and just kind of trying to keep things fresh and bright and airy. In parallel with that, we had a graphic design agency, Studio LR, who were brought in to effectively come up with a kind of internal manifestation and graphics approach, which really was very successful. You can see there's a couple of examples of how these artist graphics are integrated into the glazing and the landscape. They really do help to bring the outside in and create a lot of visual interest internally. And that's kind of coupled with the use of timber as well. We've used quite a lot of timber cladding internally, both vertically on walls and within ceiling spaces, just to uplift a number of key areas throughout each of the buildings. And then obviously creating a little bit of identity through each of the houses. So the houses have different names, which again are all tied into the landscape design. And there was an exercise to generate a series of kind of text statements around that, which were again kind of thought-provoking and stimulating. Another aspect was that certainly every prison I've ever worked on, I think it's every Scottish prison service prior to this project have all had steel door sets, which are very, very institutional, very austere, and do not give a feeling of anything other than being in a prison. The approach from day one from SPS was that this facility had to have timber door sets, and there was a fairly exhaustive process with a secure door provider to go through to develop a door set that provided the security requirements, but also gave that domestic appearance, which I think has been very successful at the end of the day. In terms of feedback, we have had a couple of sessions, one a sort of formal sit-down session with SPS, the management, and staff who work around the prison, and that was about a year and a half ago. We have since visited 2 or 3 times, just informally discussing with staff, and I think some of the feedback that we've had has been fantastic in terms of both how the staff have experienced the change between the old establishment and new establishment, but also how there has been some fairly clear changes in attitudes of the women in custody. These are some of the statements that came out of the post-occupancy evaluation that we carried out. And I think that the overall process is still evolving, but you can see there that there's statements around how much more time staff have to interact with women in the new facility, and even down to the small things around how vanity units are used, and some of the spaces are subdivided in such a way that people can either be in groups or they can retreat into more personal spaces as and when they feel. Yeah, you can see women on arrival have a very positive initial reaction to the bedroom spaces. So it's been a very worthwhile process to go through in terms of understanding how the staff and the women have benefited from this new environment. And these are just some more views of the house building on the left, and the library space to the right-hand side. And just on the final slide here, this was just an anecdote. There was a media company that came in to make a production on the new women's estate, and there was a particular woman in custody who I think she was quite overwhelmed by how different the new establishment was, and that she was able to actually meaningfully reintegrate with other people in the new establishment. So it's things like that you hear that makes the whole thing worthwhile. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed that run through. It's given you a bit of an insight into both the design process and the project itself. I've got a series of floor plans at the end if any of the questions kind of divert around that topic.
Thank you very much, David. That's fantastic. So far, we haven't got any questions, but I'm sure that there will be some coming up now that everyone has had a chance to see the presentation. And yes, there's one coming up. What's being said is there are really nice spaces which they understand the reasoning behind, and it's all about positive change. However, has there been any concern raised in relation to reoffending, as life on the outside may not be as pleasant as inside?
Yeah, I think it's always a very difficult one to kind of get your head around the answer. It's you know, when the women are in custody, that is only a part of the process, and um, I guess the whole point of trying to create an environment that is beneficial to the women is to try and give them that experience and that training and that self-worth of being in a space that is well considered and gives them an environment that they actually feel that they're not being forgotten about. It's a kind of it's slightly less tangible, obviously, in terms of you're really trying to create a therapeutic
Yeah.
treatment, if you like, for them in that regard. It's there are other aspects in terms of external agencies that come in and provide some sort of training, social work and what have you. But the other part of the story is, I guess, slightly out of Scottish Prison Services control, which is how they are reintegrated into the community when they leave, and what opportunities they're given at that point in time. But certainly when they're in, they can be given all the training and all the life experience that they need to make that journey or to make that link a little bit more possible.
Yes. I mean, what you have there is a design that helps the women to be more robust in their values and their self-value. And I think the question, because I actually visited the prison on another occasion and talking that very same question,
Yeah.
the governor warden made the point that there's not enough move-on facilities within Scotland to actually build into all the good work that the prison does, both
Yeah.
in its design and in the services it provides. But I mean, that doesn't negate you've got to start, and what you've done is made a design that must be beneficial to well-being as well as mental health and self-value.
But even, right from the very beginning, SPS, that the strategy was, these are not prisoners. These are women in custody. They're not cells, they're bedrooms. They're not house blocks, they're houses. So it was all about the language that was being used, because, something as simple as that has a pretty major effect on how people feel that they're being treated.
Yes, absolutely. There's a more pragmatic question. Can you talk us through the plans?
Yeah. I'll just share my screen again. Okay, so the buildings on site, I don't know if you can see my cursor here. The front of house building, now this plan's been rotated 90 degrees, so east is down to the bottom of the page. The front of house building has a family centre to the front, which is a small pavilion adjacent to the entrance plaza. And that is really it's a facility that can be used by the community, but it also acts as a kind of uh, a place for families when they arrive, if they're coming by bus and they've come early before a visit, or if they're leaving a visit and they're waiting for a bus, that facility can be used by families. It's got a kind of lounge area within it and a children's play area. That's linked to the front of house building. I'll talk through the detail of each plan as I go through the slides, but so that houses the sort of management staff and visits accommodation. The central building has on the right-hand side a whole number of sort of service facilities, and on the left-hand side, more kind of educational and fitness and what have you. You've then got the array of the houses around two separate buildings, each with two houses that are conjoined. You've got the assessment centre at the bottom right here. And there's also a small retreat building, which is a kind of multi-purpose, multi-faith type building, and a grounds maintenance and animal care building within a kind of allotments area to the south. So these are two stories of the front of house building. So this is the visitor centre. There's a glazed link corridor through to the central reception area. So that is the view that you saw with the main reception desk looking straight through to the courtyard. We've got visits accommodation off to one side, staff accommodation off to the other, and then at first floor level, we've got the management suite and further staff accommodation over the other side of the bridge link across the double height atrium. Nice. The central facilities building, it's rotated again 90 degrees. So this is really two wings of accommodation with a central sort of hub space, which is your metal-clad, heavily glazed pavilion that links the landscape either side of it. So this has a cafe at one end and a dining area at the other. The cafe has a library space off it. It's got an art classroom. It's got hairdressers. It's got a life skills classroom where people can be taught how to utilize certain kitchen material, etc. There's a small gym as well. On the other side, you've got your prisoner reception. You've got a fairly large health centre. But you've also got things like kitchen, industrial cleaning, laundry facility, some canteen, warehousing and storage and what have you. So there's quite a lot of heavily serviced accommodation on this side, which is where the vehicle yard is. And this is just a typical house. So you can probably, you'll have seen the diagrams that relate closely to this. So the idea of coming into the entrance to each house, looking straight through into the landscape beyond, and these triangles of social accommodation formed by the angled wings that kind of array around the site. So they're all slightly different, but they all kind of follow the same overall configuration. And these are just a series of elevations, so they're probably you've seen the photographs. So that's really that's the main floor plans. I've not included every single building on that.
Thank you. I've got lots of questions for you now, David.
Okay.
The first one is you've spoken about how you've been challenging a traditional prison design brief, working with SPS to reframe their thinking. From your perspective, what was the most difficult institutional mindset that you had to get over? How did you push back against convention?
I guess generally as you would expect, the security requirements and operational requirements in prisons are very extensive and robust, and the whole approach to trying to get buy-in from the people that have to operationally manage the prison every day, who are used to a prison running in a certain way. That I think that was always a challenge that kept rearing its head. Trying to create a lot of openness within the design. I think the security standards that SPS had at the time, and I guess still have, were mainly focused around the design of an adult male establishment. But males in custody behave very, very differently to females in custody. So the security requirements should be reconsidered for females in custody. And I think that allowed us a little bit of flexibility in that regard, but it was just trying to get that kind of comfort and buy-in from the people who are actually going to be using the facility. And that was, I think, a process that not only took a little bit of time during the design of the prison, but I suspect it probably took quite a bit of time once the new facility was open as well, for staff who just, have to familiarise themselves with a slightly different way of working, I guess.
Yeah, and not having precedents is really difficult because you have no data to base, your suggestions on. So I think it's really important that hopefully SPS do build into the data coming out of it.
Yeah.
But you've segged into the next question, which is, what do you think the main difference would be if this had to be designed for men?
I think we probably wouldn't have been able to consider some of the extent of openness and transparency that we have. The this we're now working on HMP Glasgow, which is obviously the replacement for Barlinnie. We are trying to take as much of some of the kind of concepts within this design into that, but it's very difficult in terms of just the far more enhanced security requirements that I guess that are it's a difficult one to I guess it demonstrates the fact that this is very different. It does demonstrate that, there should be a difference between designing for a female establishment or a male establishment.
Interesting. Basically, another question is, one of the feedback slides suggested that the Thistle block was particularly notable for positive rehabilitation for both the accommodation and the use of the group spaces. How did this differ from any of the other blocks? Was it its location, its colour, its design aspects?
So the Thistle block is what's shown on this drawing as the assessment centre.
I see.
And the main difference is that within the standard houses, the bedrooms open directly into the living area, if you like, whereas the assessment centre, and unfortunately I don't have a plan of it at the moment, that effectively had three L-shaped wings of bedrooms, and the sort of living accommodation, if you like, was separated from those. So I think that offers a little bit more flexibility in terms of allowing the women to retreat away from social spaces if they need to, or if there's potentially some activities that involve some people and not others. It just allows the staff a little bit more flexibility to, um, I guess, have different groups within the same building at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because when I was there, I was struck by the potential of the shared space to be a shared living area and people coming together. But at the same time, as you point out, there may be some that doesn't suit as well. So it's interesting. Yeah. A question about the catering. Is it central or in each house?
So it's actually both. There is a dining space within the middle of the central hub building here, and there's a kitchen, the main kitchen with a servery adjacent to that. But there are also certainly in 3 or 4 of the houses there are satellite kitchen facilities with serveries. So that allows SPS and I guess the women themselves a little bit of flexibility in terms of whether they want to stay within the house or come across to the central hub to socialise.
Yeah. So I'm conscious that this is a women's facility, but there's a question about what do you think might be done with existing facilities? Because obviously we're now looking at how we repurpose what we've got. Is there anything to respond to the rehabilitation in the design of existing places that might be relevant? It's quite a difficult one. You have to know the
Yeah,
estate.
yeah. I mean, the house blocks certainly within the Mail estate are traditionally um, all made of precast concrete inner leaf, outer leaf, or brickwork outer leaf, precast inner leaf. And not just that, most of the internal walls are all precast concrete as well. So they're very, very security driven. Uh, from that regard, they become particularly inflexible spaces to try and reconfigure. Um, I'd like to think, well, and they come in different shapes and sizes through different eras when they've been designed. You'd like to think that there's potentially some scope for trying to revisit some of them to create a little bit more openness and a little bit more. I think one of the things we've learned with this project is that the smaller groupings of say 20 uh, are more appropriate for trying to create relationships and sort of smaller communities as opposed to, say, a house block wing that's got 36 cells off it, which is traditionally what you would tend to get with the Mail estate. So the other buildings are a little bit more flexible because they're generally steel frame with Metsec inner leaves and what have you. So there is probably a bit more flexibility to adapt these. So I would hope it would be something that could be considered.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to finish by saying what struck me was the landscape in this project, your response to the landscape and the landscape created. So could we have a shout out for the landscape architect as well?
Yes, apologies. So that was Linda Kerr design. We've worked with Linda on a number of projects. She got heavily involved with the existing garden party at Cornton Vale. So that would be both staff and the women in custody. And a lot of the design that you see there was developed with them. And there was a deliberate attempt to leave a number of spaces for future projects for the women themselves. And I guess, it's hats off to SPS for providing a good budget, which really does. You just have to look at the photographs to understand how huge the impact the landscaping makes on the overall feeling throughout the spaces.
And your design opens out to show that as well, which is fantastic. So it's a really good partnership. I've got to say, in these days to increase biodiversity, we need to make sure that we hang on to our landscape budgets because
Yeah.
they, again, in repurposing, they could make such a difference. But I'd just like to thank you again and to thank Chloe for sponsoring this award because I think there's no doubt that it's the most innovative facility, not a prison, but very much hopefully something for the future for the rest of our estate to look to and hopefully to build in some of the innovation and learn some of the lessons as well, hopefully through improved well-being and less self-harm of inmates, etc. So thank you very much indeed. There's
Yeah.
one, yeah, somebody came in at the last minute question, but I'll maybe get you to answer it quickly. They talked about neurodivergency in the colour scheme. Was that taken into account?
So, well, there was a degree of not so much research, but we did explore color psychology with the user groups at the time. So certain spaces were focused on being certain colors, whether it was to create calming environments or more stimulating environments. Uh, uh, as you would expect, there was a bit of kind of some people have it's quite subjective, I suspect, to a certain degree. Some of the psychology is, it does seem kind of well rooted. But yeah, I think the way that the graphics work helped to kind of soften that a little bit more, and having that kind of green spine through everything helps to.
Yeah,
We didn't really want it to say, "Oh, this is the red building, this is the blue building." I think it's just trying to keep it really, really subtle. I think was
yeah.
probably
Well, on that, got the last question in, and thank you very much indeed. And as I say, please do sign up for any of the other special category awards in detail sessions. Thank you, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.